It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in the Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at the Doombook of Chaos, number 6. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, this is Doombook of Chaos, number 6, from 1982. Hope you enjoy the video. Today's video is sort of a bittersweet one for me because I've been really enjoying this fanzine called the Doombook of Chaos. I love saying it, I love reading it, and I think it's been really well done. It gets better and better, and unfortunately this is the last one I have. It's a heavy stock cover, regular size paper folded in half and stapled. I'm not positive whether this fanzine ends with issue 6 or not. If it does, it's sort of sudden and a surprise, because with a lot of these fanzines, you know, when you read them, the last couple of issues, you can really tell that the people behind that are about done and ready to move on to something else. This one is really hitting its stride. It's gotten better and better. The quality is getting better. They're getting lots of submissions. They mentioned in here that it actually got out after only 2 months, which is the sort of, you know, official stated goal, which they've never been able to meet up till now. So everything about this makes it feel like it was a fanzine that was maybe settling in to really put out a number of additional issues. And maybe I only have 6, and maybe there's some out there. I'm going to continue to do research and see if I can learn more about it. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. So the cover's great. We're back to John Grandidge's art here on the cover. It's a little brighter yellow maybe than what it looks like in the video. It's a very I don't know, whatever you'd say, yellow color in real life. The Doombook of Chaos logo is kind of interesting again, and then this is the fantasy and science fiction role-playing games fanzine on this big block up here on the top left. You've got like a dragon zooming in, a more or less human-looking fighter down here at the bottom, and then some totally alien type of creature that he looks like he's battling. And again, issue 6, 50 pence. Here's our table of contents. We've got the editorial, which basically just talks generically about the magazine and looking for submissions. Things from the Crypt, new monsters. The Tome of Darkness, which is sort of Brad's editorial, or maybe not editorial, but just his thoughts about whatever's going on in AD&D or the games he's playing. Beneath the Topics, and last issue it was the Typics, and now it's Topics. I don't know, they changed how they spelled their little mini fanzine. As I mentioned, this is one of those that takes the approach, they've got like little fanzines, so 3-4 page sections from different authors, and they're sort of collated to put the fanzine together. Amoeboid Thoughts is John Grandidge's, or Len Grandidge's, little fanzine. Horde of Thaumaturgic Wonders is what they call their new magic items, and they've got a couple just randomly stuck in here in different pages. Other Worlds is a new contribution from Mike Lewis, who is very well known in the fanzine community as the person responsible for Dragon Lords, which had a long run, and we'll talk about those at some point. Caius Contact is a new contributor, Caius Jennison. Has a very short article. NPCs is Real People, it's from Richard Lee. Ravings from the Asylum is a brand new one from Andrew Humphreys. Tales of Morak is the narrative description of Brad's campaign, and Thun is the city he's been talking about, and it's finally coming to an end here, this issue. And again, here's our contributors. I mentioned most of these people. Pete Klemperer provides one of the new monsters, and I think everybody else I mentioned, they turn in little tiny fanzines. That's how they're involved in the production. First up, Things from the Crypt, new monsters. You notice this sort of masthead, if you will. Hudson Shaw has provided some new art here, and it's like this minotaur relaxing for the description of the title. So Pete Klemperer provides us the Grebo, a humanoid, green, gibbering, and nasty, he calls it, with yellow glowing eyes. It's just a little subterranean creature that likes to move around at night or in the dark. It can claw you, and it has the Squirm Glare. It's a special attack, gaze attack versus one person at a time. And you drop what you're holding and just sort of stand there. don't know if you're mesmerized or paralyzed, but you just sort of stand still. And that's basically it. They're 1+2 hit dice, armor class 7. And so basically you're going to meet 2 to 4 of them at a time. So not a particularly difficult monster. Not much to distinguish them from some traditional monsters, except for maybe the gaze attack. Then John Grandidge, who's got a lot of the space in this fanzine because he has a big adventure, has a new monster in there called the Fire Spider, and here it is. It's basically a giant spider. Females are larger than the males, and they can shoot rays either of enfeeblement from their eyes, or they can shoot sort of bolts of flame from their eyes. That's their big special ability. The Tome of Darkness, that's Brad's discussion. It's a general discussion about what's going on in the world. He talks about Gary Gygax. He talks about going to the Games Workshop Games Day there in London, and some things that went on there. He talks about all the fanzines, and that's what I've heard. Like there was like a big distribution of fanzines at this event, including, he said, they went there and were able to sell a bunch of their fanzines as well. He ran a dungeon at the convention and thought that was a lot of fun as well. And he has a little comment at the end about the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules, and says, look, he knows, like we need these, but like he still is a big fan of make your own rules or modify your own rules to make it work for your system. So the next thing we have is Loris Bennett's Beneath the Topics. The last issue was Typics, now it's Topics, so I'm not sure which the right name is, but maybe they're changing their mind. The first thing in her 2-page fanzine is a narrative description of fantasy adventure in her home campaign. It's talked about these adventures in the last issue, and she's continuing to describe it here. The next thing that she has is a monster she has statted up for RuneQuest called the Flaming Ghost Newt. It's a spirit. When it died, it didn't get to go to its home plane, and so it's angry. It'll attack you. It can do flame damage, which will hurt your charisma, or it can use its weapon, sword, or knife, and when it hits you, it'll drain a hit point permanently. And when this thing absorbs enough drained hit points, then it can go back to its home plane. That, of course, is what it wants to do. The next thing is John Grandidge's Amiiboid Thoughts. As I mentioned, it takes up several pages in the fanzine, and it covers a lot of things, including a big adventure, which we'll talk about here in a second. The first he's got his reviews of the articles from Doombook of Chaos number 5. Mixed bag. He likes some of the stuff, some of the other stuff not so much. He's got a discussion about one of his characters that plays in Brad Bennett's Infinite World sci-fi game or campaign, and that's been mentioned in several issues, so it seems to be a pretty big deal there. He's got a discussion of the struggle between law and chaos. He says that's sort of what is going on in role-playing games, right? It's the battle between law and chaos. He says, which he draws a parallel between TSR's AD&D rules, which are, trying to impose order on everything. And he says, like, then the fanzines and some of the magazines are more like the forces of chaos, because they're coming in with creative ideas and changes. And he says, really, just like in real life, you wouldn't want one or the other to win out. You want to keep that balance in your game world as well. Then he moves to his home campaign. Talks a little bit about it as background for this adventure, which is placed there. And he says, there's this island that has a connection to other planes. He said it looks like a donut, and the lake in the middle is you can get to other planes by going through that water somehow. And people there craft these magical items. On the island, the spirit of it attaches to a spirit from another plane. The spirit looks at its natural form, but then if it's removed from the island, it'll look like, in this case, a ring. He said it could be a sword, it could be a mace, it could be a book, anything. And so this spirit is able to communicate telepathically or even project an image. And anyway, so it's going to draw the party to the island for this adventure. And the creature, the spirit, is seeking knowledge, and there are these ancient tomes down at the bottom of this tomb. And, typical kind of setup, right? And so here is the map. I like this one quite a bit. I like the drawings. I like this. It ties together. It's very logical. And basically, as I mentioned, you're going to go into this tomb. As you can see, there are secret doors here. Obviously, there are traps, different monsters, and it's all very logical and ties together, I think, very well. With one exception, this guy's got some really powerful monsters that apparently he's summoned and just holds here as guards for the big battle towards the end. And he also even has down here at the bottom, right, this map. I love these little maps, the side maps, to show you how it goes down as you go down the stairs and so forth. So anyway, this is a really good one. This one will probably take you, it'd be a really long session. Probably more like players that I play with take a while on this kind of stuff. It'd probably take 2 sessions to get through this. But it's a good one. Like you said, it provides a good sort of jumping off point or way to connect into the campaign world, or there's lots of other things you could do following on to this, right? And so Patricia Cross, who's a member of their home campaign group, has written out a playtest 3-page narrative of their group going through this this dungeon that John had created. It was pretty rough going from them. I think they nearly died a couple of times going through. So the Horde of Thaumaturgic Wonders, it's just what they call their new magic items. They have 2 new magic items here by Brad. The first one is called the Sack of Brad, and it's a backpack made from green dragon scales or skin. And essentially it's enchanted, it has an ego, and it will take over the person who wears it over time. So it takes about a year, but you should see some changes in their personality and behavior over that period of time as a hint. So obviously it's a cursed item. The person will not willingly let it go. Players could obviously take it away from them and maybe get rid of it to protect them. So the sack usually is given some magical enchantment as sort of an additional inducement to hold on to it. Things like fire resistance, magic resistance, common magic users shield spell, which I think those all seem okay. Flight ability, telepathy I wouldn't probably do. Maybe water breathing I would do. But so anyway, good ideas. Here's a particularly bad cursed item called the Leech Boots, which would look like some type of enchanted boot, or at least you would want to make your players think they might be enchanted. And they begin to feel lightheaded and as if maybe they're floating a little bit, because that's because their feet are, and then eventually their legs are going numb, because the boots will open a gash in the bottom of they will numb the foot and then open a gash and suck out the blood, because they're actually a creature, they're alive. They drain out one they drain off 1 hit point every round. If you pull them off, it creates a massive wound in the process, but obviously it's better than getting killed completely. The next article is really interesting. This is from Mike Lewis, who's the gentleman who was involved with Dragon Lords, which is very well done and had a long run, 22, I believe, issues in total. But Mike writes an article here he calls Other Worlds. That's his mini fanzine. Talks a little bit about the stuff in the prior issue. And like most people, liked some stuff he didn't. And then he has something that he's working on, which is a sci-fi campaign that he's been running himself. Next we have a new contribution, Caius Jennison, and it's Caius's Contact, and it's for Trolls and Tunnels and Trolls adventure, but it's a magic item, and so it's basically could be anything, right? So it's this really nasty weapon. It's like a dagger sized. You stick it in, the barbed part gets stuck, but when you pull it back out, the middle will split and the blades will pop apart to cause all kinds of horrible damage. So obviously pretty vicious weapon. And then he has a little comic strip here. This guy says charge, you see the foot, he jumps in, bang, and then his punchline at the end is, would you like me to manicure your other foot? So that's the end of that. He also offers, I think it's the same person at the bottom, and if you want to participate in his campaign, gives you name and address. Says he's 17 years old. It just shows you how much enthusiasm came from young people in this era of Dungeons and Dragons. The next contribution is NPCs as Real People by Richard Lee. The gist of what he's talking about here is the importance of having some really interesting and deep NPCs. He talks about giving the NPCs background, really well thought out background. He said, not everyone in your campaign, but you should have a few of these that can really add a lot of, not necessarily realism, but make the story come alive when you interact with people who have a lot of depth, they have motivation, they have a history. And he says, I think this is correct, it makes the Dungeon Master, it's easier for the Dungeon Master to role play that NPC and give them some meaningful interaction with the party instead of someone who's a little, kind of a flat character, just a generic merchant or whatever you might be. And he gives you an example of one he's come up with here. Then we have a new contribution, a new mini fanzine, and this is called Ravings from the Asylum, and the contributor is Andrew Humpreys. He gives an introduction of himself, and he's got this view of the scenarios that are in a lot of fanzine, and he says they can be a little underdeveloped or uninteresting because they says you usually have this really great story or introduction that's creative and you're excited. He said by the time you get to the second room of or second, sort of potential combat encounter or room of a dungeon, it goes flat. And it's like you open the door, there's orcs, kobolds, goblins, whatever in there, and then it's just combat. And he said so his charge is to try and come up with things that are more interesting, and sort of maybe less linear, and create more of a story than just basically more of a game, right? Where it's like you see monsters, you roll dice, you kill monsters. He illustrates this by talking about a encounter from his own campaign that takes place in town, and he does say he thinks towns are probably underutilized because he says there's so much opportunity for role playing, for adventures to go in different directions, for sort of unusual and unexpected things to happen. Then we have Tales from Morak, which is back. This is Brad's home campaign. He gives short little snippets of an adventure from his home campaign. My critique remains the same. I feel like these things never really gain momentum, and so maybe they're a little short, maybe it's his style, I don't know. But in any event, they continue on their adventure, and this time they've been down underground. They found their way into a wine cellar, so they think, hey, this is probably attached to some person's abode or a business or something, and so they make their way up and they're back out on the street again. Thun 6, and this is the final contribution where he gives the numbered descriptions of the numbered buildings. Remember, in the very first issue, he has a map of Thun, which he never shares again, maybe for space purposes. But if you don't have that first issue, then this is really not a very helpful article. And so every issue he gives a page or two, sometimes three, of descriptions of all the different numbered buildings inside of his city. And he continues off with a few random ones. He's got a little southeast section of town with a couple of taverns and food shops. He's got the town hall, which is a fairly important building. He doesn't really give much description of anything in it or anyone in it. Just says that's what that building is. The assassin, a home building for the assassins, and then a few towers where the guards are and so forth in there. He does mention and again, this is my point about how it doesn't feel like this magazine's going to stop. He talks about maybe he'll give you some other ideas in the next one, like a guide where he lists all the buildings, just their name, number and name in order. Maybe he'll give some other information about the town, and of course he says, and then there's the whole underground. I don't know if it's going to be a dungeon or what exactly is going on underground, but there's sort of a under the earth level here in his mind as well. This is the rear page, and I wouldn't normally share this except for John Grandidge has gone back. I think I'm saying this correctly because I see the initials there, and I think he's redrawn a lot of the art from earlier issues. He's got the very first cover here. Right there is the very first cover. He's got several pieces from other covers. He's either redrawn or copied the art from some of the monsters that have appeared and other artwork that's appeared in some of the other issues, not just his own either, from other people. So I thought that was kind of interesting little border there. And then this is the rear cover. This is Hudson Shaw's. It looks like a goat and a cow as far as I can tell. And the goat seems to be in love with the voluptuous cow he's got here on the rear cover. So that is it for the Doombook of Chaos, issue number 6 from 1982. I am sad to see this fanzine come to a close. I've enjoyed these a lot. I've thought the quality got better and better. And again, it really feels like this one was destined to continue. So I'm quite interested to learn what the story is about this if I can find someone who knew one or more of these people. Be back next week with a brand new fanzine. And I'm looking forward to that as well. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Have a great rest of the Friday. Have a great weekend. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.